So, good morning, good evening everybody. So, we are back into this quantitative finance course and we were discussing about derivatives. So, initially we discussed about forward futures and then very rudimentary definitions of options, call and put, what is the concept of long and short and so on and so forth. So, now we are trying to find out the prices of forward and futures. So, considering the basic difference between the forwards and futures, that one can be exchanged, traded, another is over the counter, another has to have a definite time period before which it cannot be exercised, another can be exercised depending on the demand and supply, when it is depending on the buyer and seller. So, we will consider the simple price concept of how prices are found out for the forwards and try to use the same concept when you go to the consider the prices of the futures. Even though the prices may not be exact, but it will give you some good idea that how the prices of the futures are decided depending on very simple assumptions. So, with repetition, I will again say the main variable of the symbol F is for the forward price, with the suffix basically denoting the time frame, where 0 denotes the current time frame. So, if it is 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, the suffix, it will denote the different time frames. S is the spot rate of that particular product which you are trying to buy and sell. So, if you remember, I did mention there is room 1 where the spots are being traded, bought and sold, and the corresponding room 2 has the derivatives of those spots where the forward, futures, options are being traded, bought and sold. Then you have R as the risk free interest rate without the suffix F being given. Again, we will consider very simplistically riskless in lending, borrowing rates are same. And the fourth so called variable is the time frame, which is in years. So, we will stick to the years. It can be month, but we will convert everything into years. Now, forward price for an investment asset providing no income, that means there is no intermittent payment, is given by the fact that F will increase at the same continuous compounding rate as RF. So, it will be given by F0, which is the price of the forward is given by S0 into the e to the power RT. Now, if you have the Bank of England actual data from 13th July 2007 and the spot price is given as 327.518 UK pound, the risk free interest rate is given by 5.75 per annum continuous compound rate. It is a time frame of 6 months, which is 6 by 12. Your forward price is calculated given by this formula, which is S0 into e to the power RT. Now, as I am repeating these things, but it is basically make you to well aware of that. If the forward price is greater than the right hand side, which is S0 e to the power RT, then arbitrage will buy the asset and short the forward contract in order to make a profit. If it is just the other way around, then he or she would short the asset and buy a forward position. That means, the short and the long would be consecutively different depending on whether the value of F is greater than S into e to the power RT. Now, consider you have a forward price, but for an investment which pays dividend at some intermittent times. So, I which is given is S0 minus I is 0 is basically the present value of all the intermittent payments. So, here it is not given a suffix. So, I is the present value of all the incomes for the investment asset. So, consider that 15-month forward is there, principal value face value is 100, continuous compounding per annum interest rate is given by 4.86. This data is as I mentioned, is calculated from the Federal Reserve, and for the 6 months. So, each coupons are for 3, they would be paid at 6 months, 12 months, so on and so forth. So, based on that, if you find out I0, then you can find out the F0 price also, given the fact it is S0 minus I0, that is in bracket into the e to the power RT. Now, consider that your forward price is for an investment which is paying you some continuous dividend. So, dividend is basically some amount of money which is coming back and you are calculating with respect to continuous respect is being paid back to you. So, obviously, when you try to find out the corresponding the investment value as on date, which is I0, obviously has to be factored by the concept of e to the power minus some R1t. So, this R1 and RF, which is the risk free interest rate, are not the same. So, here you have considered the known dividend yield is given by Q. So, if I try to find out the known dividend yield present value, it will be S0 into the e to the power minus Qt. So, obviously, you will be getting some money back. So, the overall amount which you will find out in order to find out f, which is the forward rate, would be S0 into e to the power. There are two terms, r is the risk free interest rate, which is the money coming back to you, and minus q is the amount of so called money which you would be finding out at the present value to find out all the amounts which will be taking place till the time to maturity, and obviously t is the time to maturity in years. So, here if you note the last line, it says that Q is the rate of continuous dividend yield being provided by the investment. Dividend yields implies that when the income is known and when it is expressed as a percentage of the asset price, then this percentage is the dividend yield for the particular value. So, the value of Q and R are on percentage terms per annum continuous, and the dividend yield is being carried on the expressed as asset price based on which you are trying to find out the dividend yield. Now, again consider A is given as 100, R risk free interest rate is given, T is time is 15 months, which is 15 by 12, the coupons are given as 3 per 6 months. So, it will be 3 for the first 6 months, again 3 for the next 6 months, and so on and so forth. Maturity of the actual financial asset, that is the bond, is happening in 18 months. So, what you need to find out is what is the total payment. So, if you see the first value, which is basically 3 into e to the power minus 0.0486 into 6 by 12 is the present value of the coupon which is being paid after 6 months, and what is the value now. The next term is again 3, because 3 would be paid after 12 months into e to the power RT, which is also the same minus RT, because you are trying to find it now, but here the time frame will change. It will now become 12 by 12, because that amount of payment which is happening is after 1 year. So, you are trying to basically bring that whole amount of money as of now and trying to find out the present rate. And when this total amount of duration of 18 months is over, so obviously there would be two payments. One is after 18 months you have the coupon payment of 3, and also the principal amount, which is 100. So, it will be 100 plus 3, which is 103, which you will get after 18 months, and you will try to bring that money value as of now. So, obviously it will be e to the power minus r into t, where t is now 18 month period, which when converted into years will be 18 by 12. So, the actual value you can find out will be given by 101.5441, and you can find out the value of Q also depending on this value of 101.5441. Now, what is the fundamental principle of forward price? So, let us give a very simple example in order to understand how the balancing is done depending on you have a spot in the room 1 and some forward in room 2. So, I am not mentioning what is the quantum of spot, it can be anything, it can be 1 unit, it can be other units also. Similarly, this forward can also be of 1 unit or less or more than that, but we will try to basically balance a portfolio such that the overall risk comes out to be 0. What I mean by risk is basically the overall fluctuation, the price is done in such a way that the portfolio which you formulate using some quantum of a spot and some quantum of the forward balances. So, buy a spot of what value, e to the power minus qt. I will come to that why we are taking e to the power minus qt, and reinvest that total amount of asset income in that particular forwards. So, now what you do is that buy a spot of some amount e to the minus qt, now short a forward contract of 1 unit of that particular asset. So, you are trying to basically play in both rooms. The first statement means you buy a spot in room 1, second statement means you short sell a forward contract of 1 unit. Now, what happens? In room 1 you have basically bought a spot of this quantum e to the power in minus qt. So, that will be increasing. So, at what rate it increases? It increases at that rate of e to the power plus qt. So, the total quantum is e to the power minus qt is increasing by the rate of e to the power qt. So, they cancel out. So, at the end of the time period it becomes 1. Now, under the terms of contract you sell a forward at f0 when the time expires. So, what it happens is that in spot you basically invested, that amount became 1, total quantum became 1, including the increase, and when you sell that in room 2, it is exactly equal to the forward. So, if you consider the outflow and the inflow, initially what you had basically bought a spot that was an outflow of money, then when the time expires you buy back that spot which is inflow on money, and simultaneously you basically sell a forward contract also. So, initially there was outflow, at time t there is an inflow and outflow, but this inflow and outflow are happening in two different rooms, spot in room 1, forward in room 2. So, the initial outflow which is given for that particular spot, because now that quantum was given by e to the power minus qt, but what is the spot price? Spot price was S0. So, the overall outflow was S0 into e to the power minus qt, and the final inflow which is happening is F0. So, at that present value what you have, that S0 which you have had increased by this value which is S0 into e to the power minus qt, which is the present value, that has increased by the quantum of risk free interest rate, which is S0 into e to the power minus qt into e to the power plus RT. So, if that is exactly equal to the forward, then what you will have is the forward which is F is equal to S0 into e to the power in the bracket R minus Q. The R term is coming for the increase, and the minus q is coming to the fact that you are basically getting some dividend back at time t is equal to 0, you are trying to basically find out that value. So, at the end of the day, if you see the equation, if you take e to the power minus RT onto the right, is exactly the same equation. So, F0 is equal to S0 into e to the power in the bracket R minus q into t, where t is the time frame based on which you are trying to find out the forward price. Now, till now we have been considering about capital F always, that was the forward price, but there is a different concept also which is known as the value of the forward. So, the value of the forward and the forward price are different things. Price of F basically means depends on the demand and supply in room 2 plus the relationship between the spot and the forward, and the value of the forward is what is the intrinsic difference between these two prices at which it will be bought and sold. So, obviously, if there is an intrinsic difference in the spot and the forward, the value of the forward will be different. It can be either positive or negative. If it is positive or negative, somebody will make a loss, somebody will make a gain. That means, a long or a short position in one of these cases would basically make a profit. So, if the long makes a profit, the short makes a loss, or vice versa. That means, who is basically selling and buying. Now, the small f, which is basically the value of the forward, considering a long forward contract, remember whatever I am saying is basically for the long forward contract, for the short forward contract it will just be the reverse. So, long forward contract is, if you see the strike price is K. So, for the long forward contract, if I try to find out the present value of the net worth when the time expires, what I do? The actual difference would be F0 minus K at that point of time, that is T. And when I try to find out the present value of that, what I do? I basically I multiply it e to the power minus RT to basically bring it as of today. So, the term which you have inside the bracket is F0 minus K is the price of the actual difference of the forward, considering F is the price and K is the delivery price when the contract expires. And the second term, which is e to the power minus RT, is basically the multiplying factor which brings back that amount of money as of now. So, this we can say is in some intrinsic value the difference in the forward contract between the long and the short position, such that if it is 0, it means it is absolutely perfect balance. If there is a positive or negative, it will mean the short or a long position would be making a profit or a loss. Now, if I am considering the long forward contract, as I mentioned, if there is a buyer, there is a seller. Hence, for the long forward contract, it was F0 minus K, whatever be the multiplying factor outside. But when I basically consider the other way around, the sign just reverses. So, what I am trying to calculate is how the value of the forward contract changes depending on the short and the long position. Hence, if the value of the contract is 0, then obviously a long or a short position does not make any profit or a loss. So, it is basically equally balanced. When I am considering the value of the contract for a dividend paying one, then also the same concept comes. The first term which you have is S0 minus I minus k e to the power RT. So, S0 is the spot as of today, I is also the value of the investment which is basically will be paid in between, but I am trying to find out the net present value of that as of today. And that minus of the third term is basically the delivery price is basically k. So, whatever the delivery price would happen at time t is equal to capital T is been brought back here at present time. So, it will be basically multiplied by e to the power minus RT. So, if the actual value which I am getting for that contract is k e to the power minus RT plus or minus is depending whether I am in a long position or a short position, and the overall net value which I have in room 1, which is the spot minus the intermittent payment which I am getting, if both of them balance, obviously it means neither the long position or the short position would be making any profit. If I go for a long forward contract, considering the long forward contract had been discussed where it is basically S0 minus I minus k to the power RT, if you see that for the short position it will just be the reverse. So, the short position would be the person who is selling the contract to the long position, and the profit and loss which they make at different point of time would just be the same value quantum wise, but with the sign change. Now, finally, if we come to the dividend paying one, again we follow the same concept. There in the dividend you had basically minus QT, which is the dividend yield. In the same light, if you see the value of the forward contract for a long forward contract is S0 into the e to the power minus QT as of now for the overall spot, and the next term is minus k e to the power minus RT is basically the delivery price of the contract in room 2, which is being brought back to the present value as of now, which is time t is equal to 0. So, now the short contract would be again the same terms, but with the sign change. Now, consider the foreign exchange contract. So, till now we had considered assets where they were paying no dividends, where they were paying dividends at equal intervals, and whether they were paying dividends at equal and continuous rate. Now, consider you are dealing in foreign currency, consider the countries are India and Japan. Now, if you see in the formula there are two interest rates, one is R, one is R star. So, remember both R and R star are risk free interest rate, but for two different countries. So, that make a distinction which should be very clear. So, F0 is the forward price measured in domestic currency. So, if I am standing in India, my domestic country is India, and the foreign currency of the foreign country would be Japan. If I am doing my calculation and trying to understand the problem standing in Japan, my domestic currency would be the yen, and the foreign currency or the foreign country would be India and Indian rupees. So, make a distinction between when I mention domestic currency and foreign currency. S0 is the current spot price measured in the domestic currency, again the same concept of domestic and foreign currency of 1 unit of foreign currency, and R star is the foreign risk free interest rate. So, R is basically R is the domestic risk free interest rate, and R star is the foreign risk free interest rate. So, whenever I am trying to calculate the value, first find out where your datum is. If you are in the domestic country and you consider that domestic country to be India, then R star and the spots and the forwards would basically be calculated accordingly. The moment you switch your position, you go to that other country, again the same example of Japan, then obviously the foreign currency becomes India, and then you find out the R and R star accordingly. Now, value of the forward contract, which is small f, depending on the foreign currency which you have, domestic and current. So, now if you see the formula, it is S0 is multiplied by some multiplicative term where R star is there, and K is being multiplied by some multiplicative term where R is there. So, these are two risk free interest rate in two different currencies. Now, what you should understand is that again room 1 and room 2 is basically the same thing. Now, room 1 is basically in country 1 and room 2 is in country 2. So, where if you denote country 1 or room 1 as the domestic one, so immediately you should be aware that country 2 is the foreign currency. So, your interest rate which you are trying to find out based on R and R star are with respect to that. So, if room 1 is domestic one, there the interest rate is R. If room 2 is the foreign country, then the interest rate is R star. If you move back to the second room, then in that case R star and R basically just reverse and you do your calculation accordingly. So, in that case, rather than expressing Indian rupees to yen, you will try to express yen to Indian rupees. So, if your domestic and foreign currency is UK and India, so in that case you will express R and R star accordingly and you will try to find out the rate of UK pound to rupees. And when you reverse your position, then again R and R star would be reversed in the sense your definition of R and R star would be reversed. So, rather than finding out UK pound to Indian rupees, you will try to find out the value of Indian rupees to UK pound to do your calculation. So, stock index futures are there. So, here in this case of the stock index futures, we will consider the Q, which is the dividend yield, would be the rate of return of that particular stock, not the risk free interest rate. The risk free interest rate, as I mentioned, is the treasury bills of 90 days for India, and obviously the Q would be with the minus sign, because the money is coming back to me, would be the interest rate based on which how the stock prices are increasing or decreasing, whatever it is. So, obviously, if it is decreasing, minus or minus Q would basically become plus. Now, examples are Dow Jones Industrial Average, Standard Poor's 500, Standard Poor's Mid Cap, Nikkei 225 stock, and so on and so forth. So, you can have all this, look at these websites and try to find out how do the stock index futures work in the value terms, then you can use those to do your calculations accordingly. Now, let us switch our discussion from actually financial assets to commodities. Commodities are actually physical objects. So, now if there is no storage cost and they provide no income, now what you will have is that the overall value of the forward will be calculated accordingly. So, F is equal to S into the e to the power RT, again R is the risk free interest rate. Now, consider there is a storage cost, fixed storage cost, or there is a storage cost per unit time, and you are trying to find out the storage cost as of now. So, what we mean by U and I0 are almost the same, but in I0 remember it was the amount of money which was coming back to me, while U basically the total outflow on money considering there is inventory. So, in this case you should basically add up S0 plus U, not minus U, where U would basically be the overall investment on inventory or such cost of carrying the commodity as of now, which is today. Then again, if you have basically the concept of storage cost per annum continuously compounded, then in the similar way as you had a dividend for the stocks which was basically paid to me, this is the outflow of money which I will basically calculate using the concept of U, small u, which is the storage proportion to the price of the commodity, and it will be founded continuously compounded. So, rather than having S0 into e to the power in the bracket R minus Q, it would now be basically be S0 into the e to the power R plus small u, because the overall amount of money it has to be paid by the person who is basically buying that particular spot based on the commodity. For commodities which yield some values due to consumptions, you can find out the convenience yield, and if they are being consumed, that means commodities are being stored as well as being consumed. So, consumption means that you are getting some benefit. So, you will basically have now three things: risk free interest rate based on the rate of increase of that particular commodity, small u is the storage cost per unit continuously compounded based on the spot price, and there would be convenience yield also depending on the consumption. So, now as you consuming, obviously the minus sign comes. So, your actual formula again now changes to S0 into e to the power 3 terms. R is the risk free interest rate, small u is basically a storage cost based on continuous compounding concept, and this y with a minus would basically means the convenience yield, the amount of consumption which you are doing on a per unit rate converted to a continuous compounding case. So, now I basically made a table where if you see the first column, it is the assets, second column is the value of the forward, and the third column is basically the prices based on which you are trying to find out the forwards. So, with this we will close this session, and in the next class continue with the summary and the consequent different type of discussion based on the forward and futures. Thank you.